Okay, so yesterday was a real eye-opener. I made some assumptions about what my students knew about estimation with regards to numbers and rounding numbers, and that just didn't happen. We started with a three-corner activity where they picked one of the questions off the board. There were three, and they could choose whichever one they wanted, and they solved. So their question was estimate the sum of this number and that number. Now, most of the two students, number one, picked the easiest possible question, which I must admit I was a little disappointed about. But this group, building their growth mindset, is going to be a major task this year. Most of them don't have a love of mathematics or even an appreciation for mathematics, so that's part of my goal for the year. So they separated and talked about their ability to estimate, or what their strategies were for rounding numbers and adding the sums. Several of the kids shared, three, 4, 5 kids shared, and they all seemed to indicate that they could do this, could round with accuracy. So I introduced the game. They played Rounding War. I showed them how to play. And then as they were playing, I went around from group to group to look at their strategies for rounding numbers. And I was asking them how they were rounding numbers. And that's when I realized that most of them didn't actually understand how rounding numbers works. They were to round to the nearest 10,000. Many of them were looking at the hundreds or the tens column because that's where the bigger numbers were, and using that to round to the nearest 10,000. So I started out at the beginning individually. I had a clipboard with me and a paper, and I was drawing number lines, and they were giving me the benchmark numbers and then showing me the halfway points, so again benchmarks, and then they were able to put it on and see how it was rounded, because they were often rounding the wrong direction. And some of them thought when rounding you could actually decrease the number you're rounding to, which was interesting. I've actually never heard of that before. This is the first time I've actually seen either one of those things. So maybe it's just because I was paying more attention. I don't know. So after a couple of tables, a couple of groups of that, I stopped the game and we did a little review on rounding, and I focused specifically on using number lines to do that. Near the end of that, they were getting it, and then they had time to play 1 or 2 more rounds. I'm going to go back to the game so I can see more practice with that, with bigger numbers. I'm hoping it's just because the numbers were into the 10,000s and not, we'll see today with the money activity that's on the board, the opener, how they round money. I'm hoping they have more familiarity with money because they will have experienced that being in grade 6. So that's sort of how yesterday went, and we did not get to the reflection part at the end because of the additional instruction on how to round numbers.